What is going on, guys? Welcome back to our GCSE psychology journey, and in this video we're going to be looking at Piaget's stage theory. Quick disclaimer, there is another video on Piaget's stage theory. If you look back at some of the previous videos, I'll post a link to that so you guys can see that. And in that video we go into more detail about Piaget's stage theory in general. This one of course is going to be focused particularly on these two studies, which are going to be highly relevant for your GCSE psychology exam. So, quick introduction. Who was John Piaget? John Piaget was born in 1896 and died in 1980. He was a Swiss psychologist known for his work on child development. Piaget's theory focuses on how children's cognitive abilities develop as they interact with the world. And the theory itself is a constructivist theory that cognitive development happens in 4 distinct stages, which are universal and sequential. Starting off with the sensory mode stage from birth to 2 years. The pre-operational stage, which is from 2 to 7 years, the concrete operational stage, which is from 7 to 11 years, and the formal operational stage, which is 12 years and on. So let's look at these stages in a little more detail. So the sensory mode stage from 0 to 2 years. In this stage, infants learn through sensory experience, for example, seeing, hearing, and also motor actions, things like reaching and grasping. Key milestones include things like object permanence. And what is this? This is understanding that objects continue to exist even when out of sight, and this usually develops around 8 to 12 months. So just because they can't see an object, it doesn't mean that it no longer exists in the world. Trial and error. And in this stage, infants experiment with objects to see the outcome. For example, if they shake a rattle, they hear a noise. And deferred imitation. So the ability to imitate actions after some time has passed, indicating that their memory is starting to develop and has developed because they can remember these actions that they saw. A child learns to differentiate themselves from the environment and begins to understand causality. So if you do something, it has an outcome and a reaction. Onto the pre-operational stage from 2 to 7 years. Children in this stage are starting to develop language and can think symbolically, but their thinking is still egocentric. They have difficulty seeing things from perspectives other than their own perspective. They can engage in symbolic play. Children use objects to represent other things. For example, a broom becomes a horse. A lack of conservation. So they struggle to understand that certain properties, for example, volume and mass, remain the same despite changes in form or appearance. For example, if you were to pour water into 2 different shaped containers, they won't be able to identify that there's still the same amount of water, it's just that the containers look different. Animism. So children may attribute lifelike qualities to inanimate objects, for example, the sun being a smiling face. The concrete operational stage from 7 to 11 years. Children begin to think logically about concrete events and develop the ability to perform operations, which are reversible mental actions, things like math problems. Conservation. Children now understand that quantity remains the same despite changes in shape. So example, like the example that we gave before, the same water volume regardless of the cup shape. Decentration. Children can consider multiple aspects of a situation, for example, both the height and the width of the container. Seriation. The ability to arrange objects in a specific order according to size, weight, or other dimensions. And of course, these are all types of classification. The ability to organize objects into different sets based on shared characteristics. So for example, grouping animals together, grouping tools together. And the formal operational stage, 12 years and up. Adolescents and adults can think abstractly and reason logically, not just about concrete events, but about hypothetical and theoretical problems also. Abstract thinking, the ability to solve problems involving abstract concepts such as algebraic equations. Hypothetical deductive reasoning. So adolescents can think scientifically, generating both hypotheses and systematically testing them to reach a conclusion, things that you guys will be doing. And of course, metacognition, so the ability to think about one's own thinking. It is a little more complex than that, but that's a very straightforward way of thinking about what metacognition is. So the ability to reflect and reason on processes that you've been through. So children and knowledge building. We have the idea of what are called schemas, and these are mental frameworks or concepts that help us to organize information. Assimilation. Now this happens when new information is fitted into an existing schema. Accommodation. Now this occurs when a schema is changed or new ones are created to fit new information. Application and criticism. So educational implications. Piaget's theory has greatly influenced education, emphasizing that teaching should be tailored to children's developmental stages. What are some of the criticisms? Well, Piaget may have underestimated children's cognitive abilities. For example, some children develop object permanence earlier than Piaget's stages suggest. His theory doesn't really account for the influence of social or cultural factors in development, and this was later addressed by Vygotsky. Again, there's a video on Vygotsky, make sure you guys take a look at that. Stages may not be as rigid as Piaget proposed. Some children may show characteristics of multiple stages all at once. So let's look at some of the key studies that you guys need to be familiar with. And we're going to start off by looking at Hughes M from 1975, and this is the Policeman Doll study. What this study was looking at is egocentricity. Piaget's concept of egocentricity refers to a child's inability to see things from another person's point of view. In the pre-operational stage, around 2 to 7 years, children assume that everyone sees, thinks, and feels the same way that they do. Hughes argued that Piaget's tasks were too abstract and confusing for young children to understand. He designed a more relatable task using 2 policeman dolls and a child doll. And the aim of this was to see if children could take another person's perspective, decentering, more effectively than Piaget had suggested by using a more understandable task. So here on the left we can see a very crude illustration of the experiment itself. So we can see we've got 2 policeman dolls and we've got a boy doll, and the child has to position this doll so that it isn't spotted. So as the methodology, children aged 3.5 to 5 years were shown a model with walls forming a cross-shaped, and these were like rooms. They were asked to hide a little boy doll so that 2 policeman dolls could not see him. The children had to move the boy doll around to a place where he was out of both policemen's view. Practice trials ensured that children understood the task, so kind of just going for a practice run just to make sure that they understand exactly what it is that they need to do. What were some of the key findings? Is that most children aged over 4 years, around 90%, were able to position the boy doll correctly so that neither policeman could see them. Even younger children performed well after practice. And the conclusion was that Hughes concluded that children are better at seeing things from another person's perspective than Piaget's original task had suggested. Piaget may have underestimated children's abilities because his tasks were too abstract or even confusing for the children. Right, on to another key study, McGarrigle J and Donaldson M from 1974, and this is the Naughty Teddy study. So this one was looking at the idea of conservation. Piaget's conservation concept refers to the understanding that quantity stays the same even when appearance changes. For example, a child realizes that the amount of water is the same whether it's in a tall, slim glass or a short, wide glass. And for this experiment, 2 rows of counters were used. So what was the aim of the study? Well, it was to see whether children's understanding of conservation, specifically number conservation, would improve if the change in the display was accidental rather than deliberate. They wanted to test whether Piaget's original conservation tasks were too confusing because the children thought the adult meant to change the layout. So what's the methodology? So 80 children, all of them from Edinburgh in Scotland, were selected. 40 who were at nursery age, and this was a mean age of 4 years and 10 months, and 40 who were of primary school age, and this was a mean age of 5 years and 10 months. The children were introduced to a naughty teddy who was liable to escape from his box and try to mess up the toys and spoil the game. The children were then shown 2 rows of counters, one with 4 red and one with 4 white counters. The teddy jumped out of his box and pushed the counters in one row around in a really haphazard way, thus transforming the display by making one row look smaller. Before and after the transformation, each child was asked the same question, with the researcher pointing to each row in turn. and it'd say, is there more here, or are they both the same number when pointing at the counters? Key findings were that about 41%, that's 33 out of 80 of the children gave the correct answer. They had the same number in each row if the display was changed deliberately. And about 68%, 54 out of 80 of the children gave the right answer if the change was accidental. For the primary children, both figures were higher than for the nursery school children. So comparing the studies and theoretical implications, both Hughes and McGarrigle and Donaldson challenged Piaget's timeline of cognitive development. The study showed that children are capable of more advanced thinking when tasks are meaningful and contextually relevant. And in summary, Piaget's original tasks may have underestimated children's abilities due to their abstract nature. Hughes and McGarrigle and Donaldson showed that the context and familiarity greatly impact children's cognitive performance. And these studies highlight the importance of meaningful, relatable tasks within the educational system. Alright guys, hopefully that gives you a better understanding of Piaget's stages of development and gives you a good understanding of those two studies, which are key studies that you guys need to really be familiar with. So make sure that you guys have got a good understanding of the aim, methodology and findings. I will catch you all in the next video. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe and comment. Let's get interacting, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.